Hey there, my name's Justin. I'm one of the pastors at Hope City. I'm really glad you're checking out this week's message. I hope you'll take a minute, look around our website, visit our YouTube channel, and download the Hope City app by searching Hope City Indy in the App Store or Google Play Store. There's great content on the app that goes far beyond weekend services. Hope City is a place where you can belong before you believe. No matter where you come from today spiritually, I hope this message helps you find hope and move closer to Jesus. Enjoy the message.
What is up, guys? How we doing today? Everybody good? So good to see you guys. My name is Justin, one of the pastors here, and if you are a guest, we're so pumped that you're here with us today as we kick off this brand new series called Wonder, and it's going to carry us right into Christmas Eve, which we have those 3 services I'm really excited about. You know, people are more eager and willing to go to church at Christmas than any other time of the year if given an invitation. And so we want to equip you. So on your chair is an invite card. Please take that with you. Give it to somebody at work. Give it to somebody in your family. Give it to somebody maybe in your neighborhood that you know is going through a tough time as we rediscover the wonder of Christmas together. And if you are a guest today, so pumped that you're here. I want to meet you after the service at the Next Steps tables out in the lobby, help you get connected, answer any questions you might have about our church. And one of the things we say around here all the time is that Hope City is a place where you can belong before you believe. And that's never more true than at Christmas. And so no matter where you come from today spiritually, if this is your first time in church in years, or this is your 100th time in church this year, you're welcome here and you belong here, and we're excited that you are here. Well, for those of you that know me and my wife, you know that typically we don't start Christmas shopping until the week before Christmas. We love chaos and stress. And so we just decide we're just going to do it the last week of the year, right before Christmas. But this year, with all the logistics issues and all the shipping issues and the import issues, Trish is like, I don't want to be stressed at Christmas, any more stressed than we typically are. So let's start, kind of shopping early. Here's all the kids' lists. And so we, to her credit, we started doing some Christmas shopping actually before Thanksgiving, which actually hurt my soul, but we did. And by Christmas shopping, I mean scrolling the Target app and hitting buy now. All right, that's kind of the extent of our Christmas shopping. Well, last week, our 22-year-old son and his wife were here for Thanksgiving from Portland, Oregon. They moved out there in June. And up until last week, we had this belief that they were going to go to Colorado for part of Christmas and then come to Indiana for part of Christmas, until he casually mentions, hey, I don't think we're going to be able to come to Indiana for Christmas. And so why don't we just do Christmas here before we leave? Which gave us like 3 days notice. And my wife, which is so Elijah, and my wife went into full Black Friday mode, all right? And if she could have bumped people out of line online, she would have, all right? And she's going to different stores. She's texting me pictures. She's like, hey, I need you to buy this, this, and this. And I'm like, easy, let's back off. Let's coordinate lists. So we have like duplicate gifts at our house. So anyway, so we get all these gifts put together. Tricia stays up, late one night wrapping them, and we do Christmas with Elijah and Julia before they took off. And this is a picture of them and their 2 dogs that were at our house for 8 days, and we're still coming down from it. But anyway, we had 4 dogs and 8 people in our house for 8 days, and it was so wonderful. But I told Trish, I'm like, this really wasn't like Christmas, because it was more like a Christmas shower, because we just gave them gifts. I got squat. I never got anything back, all right? And I'm a gift guy, and so I'm like, well, sir, are you guys going to mail my gift? You going to FedEx it? Like, what's going on? Is there a surprise waiting for me on Christmas morning from Santa? But it was phenomenal, and we had a great time, and to Trisha's credit, she made it awesome. And there are gifts that you give and you're so excited about, and you want to see the person's reaction more than anything else. Like, you're more excited than they are for their reaction, right? And there are gifts that you get that are home runs. And then there are gifts that really just don't make any sense at all, right? That just don't hit the mark. And I think every parent, their stress at Christmas time is, oh my gosh, what if my gift strikes out, right? And so I think every parent can relate to this. Check it out.
I wonder what's going to eat.
I want it. I want a toy.
What is it?
I want a toy.
What is it?
I want a toy.
How do you know it's not a toy?
I want a toy.
Open it up. Let's see what it is.
I want a
Oh.
toy. I want a toy. I want
Free.
a toy.
Aunt Val brought you a princess shirt.
I want a toy.
Look how beautiful you can be in that princess shirt.
I want a toy.
That's not very nice.
I want a toy.
How many parents can relate to that, right? How many kids can relate to that, right? Like you have this thing in your mind that all you want is what you want, and then you are given something that makes absolutely no sense. You're like, I just want a toy. Trish and I's first Christmas together, we went to Joliet, where she's from, and her grandma came up from Florida for the first time. I was meeting her for the first time, and so we go over to her aunt's house to exchange gifts, and it's this big deal. Her family's Hispanic, and so they have this huge Hispanic spread out, and it's just really festive, and her grandma has this amazing gift that's wrapped for me, really beautiful, and she's so excited to give it to me, and so I'm excited to, open it. I've never met this woman before, and she doesn't speak English, and so, I was hoping there wasn't be something lost in translation. And I opened it up, and I'm kidding you not, guys. It was a hat made out of paper that had the Florida State logo on it, and the bill was made out of cardboard. And I was like, just what I wanted, right? This is amazing. Like, and there are gifts that you open, and you're like, oh, this is interesting, right? Like you got to put your best. Oh, how did you know I wanted this vacuum cleaner, right? Oh, I hope you kept the receipt, right? Like there's levels of enjoyment when it comes to Christmas gifts. We all know what it's like to be disappointed at Christmas. But more than that, I think that we all know what it's like to be disappointed in life. We think we're going to be given something that's life-giving and hopeful and useful. And we open it up, and there's no sense of wonder. It's a letdown. It's not even close to what we wanted. Right? Like we wanted a toy. We didn't want conflict. We wanted a toy. We didn't want hurt. We wanted a toy. We didn't want pain. We didn't want abandonment. We didn't want discouragement. We wanted a toy. Today I want to talk to you about how to rediscover the hope and the wonder of Christmas. When the gifts that you're given in life don't match up to what you really want. There's this passage of scripture in Romans chapter 15, verse 13. It says this, "May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit." Anytime something's repeated in scripture, it's for emphasis. And so the writer of Romans wants you to have hope. Not only does he want you to have hope, and not only does he equate God with hope, he says, I want you to overflow with hope. And as we enter the last month of 2021, my guess is for some of you, you're not overflowing with hope. The year that you've had has been nothing that you anticipated. It's nothing that you've hoped for. For some of you, you wanted a child. This year was going to be the year that you became a parent, and you had hope. But the gift that you're opening this year is just another year of unrealized dreams. You're not a parent yet. For some of you, all you've wanted is to be married, right? And you've been the bridesmaid, and you've been the groomsman, and you've been to umpteen weddings in 2021 because all of them were canceled in 2020. And so it feels like you just got dumped on with this expectation and dumped on with this burden of wanting to be married, and you realize as you go into the last month of 2021, you're no closer to being married this year than you were in 2015, than you were in 2017, than you were in 2020. You wanted a toy, right? And what you got was singleness again. Maybe you are married, and last year you thought was an anomaly because of COVID and all the stress that it brought into your family and homeschooling and e-learning and working from home. And you thought, this is going to be the year. We're going to be able to restore our marriage. We're going to be able to restore hope. We're going to be able to reconnect with one another. And now you're a month away from another calendar year, and you're further apart than you ever have been. There's not hope there. There's distance there. Maybe for some of you who are students, you had hopes at the beginning of the semester that this year was going to be different. This was going to be the year that you built friendships. This was going to be the year that you didn't feel lonely and disengaged and didn't feel ostracized and didn't feel like depressed at lunch. This was going to be the year that you invested in your grades. This was going to be the year that you turned it around. This was going to be a year that was different from all the previous years. And now you are a couple of weeks away from the end of the semester, and you realize that none of those hopes have come true. Maybe you've lost your job, or you've lost a loved one, or maybe you just lost your way. And you aren't overflowing with hope. You're running out of hope. Webster's defines hope as a feeling of expectation that a certain desire will happen. You're going to get a toy. Today we're going to look at a story in the Old Testament that it feels like it's the most illogical Christmas story of all time. It's an unlikely story to usher in Christmas. It's a story that takes place hundreds of years before the birth of Jesus. And it's a story that is not only years away from the birth of Christ, but it feels like miles away from the birth of Christ. It's in the book of Ruth, and Ruth is a small book in the Old Testament, just 4 chapters. And it chronicles the story of 2 women, and then eventually another guy enters the story. And at first, they seem completely disconnected from the birth of Jesus. And this story takes place in the era of the judges in the nation of Israel's history. Now, King Saul was the first king of Israel, but before King Saul, the nation of Israel did not have a king. Other nations had kings. The nation of Israel had what was called judges. And these judges were people who were risen up by God. They were kind of like prophets and kind of like law people all combined together. Like they spoke on behalf of God, but they also ruled on behalf of the people. And so this is hundreds of years before the birth of Jesus, and it takes place in Israel, and there's a famine in the nation of Israel, and this guy named Elimelech decides, you know what, I'm not going to stay around for this famine, so he moves himself and his wife Naomi out of Israel into the country of Moab. Now, Moab is in modern-day Jordan, okay? So that kind of get a picture geographically of where all this takes place. Now, back in the nation of Israel's time, and really even through Jewish culture now, names are a big deal, all right? Names weren't just given by what was trending on Twitter or what was the number 1 name in a baby book in 2017. It wasn't just like something that was haphazard. Oh, this really looks nice, or that would really sound good, or I really like how this rhymes with my last name. No, names carried significance. They carried weight. And Elimelech's name literally meant, my God is king. And so here you have this guy whose name means my God is king, and he experiences hard times, and he says, you know what? We're taking our family, we're moving. We're getting out of Israel, we're going to Moab. We're going to a foreign land with a foreign government and foreign gods and pagan gods. And he wasn't living as if God was king. He wasn't living as if God was going to provide. He was taking it upon himself to provide for his family, and he was going to a foreign land and a foreign country. Now, he's married to a woman named Naomi, and Naomi's name literally means sweet and pleasant. Sweet and pleasant. Now, together, Elimelech and Naomi have 2 sons, and their sons' names are Mahlon and Chilion, which literally means sick and dying. Okay, so if they were characters in a low-budget horror film, they're the first 2 to go, all right? Like, there's foreshadowing there that it's not going to turn out good for you, all right? If your name literally means sick and dying, you're going out in the first scene of the movie. That's all I'm saying, right? And so they move to Moab, and we don't know much about their upbringing, but we know that they grow up in Moab, they fall in love, these 2 sons do, with 2 Moabite women, and they get married. And these women are not followers of God. They don't know the God of Israel. By the time you get to verse 5 in Ruth chapter 1, tragedy strikes, and Naomi's husband passes away. We don't know why. There's no explanation for it. It just says her husband died. And then later in that same verse, it says, and her 2 adult sons die as well. So you have this family that had all of this hope of escaping famine, escaping heartache. And now you have 3 widows, all grieving the loss of their husbands. Naomi is not grieving just the loss of her husband, but of her 2 boys. as well. And all of these women are battling what you and I are probably going to battle at some point this Christmas season, and that's disappointment. They're battling on a level that many of us cannot even comprehend, but all of us are going to experience some level of disappointment this Christmas. I mean, come on, I wanted a toy. I got a sweatshirt. I wanted a toy. I got a paper Florida State hat, right? I wanted a toy. This time of year, it brings me great joy when I compartmentalize it because I love Christmas. I love everything about Christmas. I love getting gifts. I love giving gifts. I love the festivities. I love the feeling that you and I have when we come to church in December. It's just different than any other time of year. I just love everything about Christmas. But this time of year also reminds me of one of the greatest hurts and most hopeless seasons of my life. Many of you know my story and our story. In 2005, Trish and I's marriage imploded when I had an affair with her best friend. It came out in October, and we were separated for 2.5 months, and so it carried right through Thanksgiving and right into Christmas. And by God's grace, even though we were separated, we started going to counseling, and God began to repair our marriage and our relationship, and we renewed our vows on December 18th of 2005. But still, things were really shaky. I mean, even though we had recommitted to one another through a recommitment ceremony, the jury was still out on whether or not that recommitment was going to stand the test of time. And so we get to Christmas Eve, and I had moved back home, which was awesome, but our house didn't feel festive. It didn't feel joyful. It didn't feel like someplace we wanted to celebrate Christmas. And so Trish said, hey, I really don't want to be here on Christmas morning. So on Christmas Eve, we decided to pack up our 3 boys who were 9, 6, and 3 at the time. And we were going to go to my parents' house in Crawfordsville. Now, if you have 3 kids and you try to pack up to go anywhere, that's a job, right? Like that's you're rolling the dice on that one. But if you try to pack up all of your Christmas and 3 kids last minute, it's a disaster. And so we get everybody in the car, we get all the presents in the car. It's literally packed to the gills. Like we can barely even sit. And we drive from Noblesville, where we started the church, to Crawfordsville, where I'm from. We get everything unloaded, and we get the kids unloaded. And it's early afternoon, and Tricia goes, we forgot Elijah's big gift. And if you're a parent, you know what the big gift is, right? It's like the one gift, like it's like the last one. It's the one that you like are video, you're on your phone with, right? And he's a middle child. I'm like, we cannot skip the middle child's last gift, right? He's gonna be in counseling like right now, and so we can do that. And so we pack up the kids back in the car. We drive back over to Noblesville. We get to the gift, and now it's like 5:30 in the evening. And Tricia goes, "It's Christmas Eve. It's 5:30 on Christmas Eve." She's like, "We should probably go to a service. We should probably go to a Christmas Eve service, don't you think?" She's like, "This will be the first time in 10 years that we haven't been in a Christmas Eve service." Not only was it the first time in 10 years that we hadn't been in a Christmas Eve service, it was the first time that we hadn't been leading a Christmas Eve service. We had nowhere to go. And so on our way back to Crawfordsville, I don't even know how we found it, but we found this church in Zionsville or Whitestown called Eagle Church. And this was before all the development out in Zionsville and Whitestown. And it was this big white box in the middle of a cornfield, and their lights were on. And I got on their website on my phone and happened to see that their service started at like 6:30 or 7. And so we walk in as civilians for the first time into a Christmas Eve service. And it felt so weird. It was out of body. It kind of felt out of place. And we sit down in this Christmas Eve service, and all the emotions came flooding over us. Loss and pain and hurt, defeat and shame, heartache of all that was lost. And we were sitting there, and one of the boys says, "Why are we at this church and not our church?" And as kindly and as quietly as Trish could say it, she says, "Because Tad's not the pastor anymore. We're not going back to that church." And I think Micah, our oldest at that time, who was 9, I think he said what everybody else was feeling. He said, "Well, I don't want to be here." And it was one of those moments, I don't know if you've had one of those moments where you're sitting and you're surrounded by people, but you feel completely alone. Not just feeling alone, you feel isolated. And that's exactly where I was. All I could think about was the pain and hurt and devastation that the people that I love the most were experiencing in this moment because of me. And then my mind also went to the people of the church that we had started 3 years before that I left behind, that I cheated on, that I hurt and devastated, that were trying to experience Christmas without me. It was a hopelessness that was almost overwhelming. And we were hopeless. We sat there and basically cried through the whole service, but we were committed to each other. And Naomi decides after the death of her husband and her 2 sons that the best thing for her to do is not to be in Moab by herself, but to go back and be with family. And she's going to go home to her hometown and try to, there was no welfare system in Moab to take care of widows, and so she decides to make this journey, and her 2 daughter-in-laws decide that they're going to go with her. And so they start out, and they get about halfway to Naomi's hometown, and Naomi says to them, hey, you know what, guys? I love your hearts. I love your commitment to me. But you guys, you don't need to go and take care of this old woman. You need to go back to Moab, to where you're from, build a life, find a man, enjoy the rest of your life. Let me go back and be with my family. And one of her daughter-in-law says, thank God, I'm out of here, right? And she leaves. But her second daughter-in-law says this in Ruth chapter 1, verse 16. But Ruth replied, don't ask me to leave and turn back. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord punish me severely if I allow anything but death to separate us. So you have these 2 women that early on were united by love. They both loved the same man. Naomi, her son, Ruth, her husband. And now they're just united in grief. And all they have is each other. And so Ruth and Naomi, they take this journey to Naomi's hometown, which, wouldn't you know it, is a town called Bethlehem. And there we get our first glimpse of how the story of Ruth and Naomi is connected to the story of Jesus. Bethlehem was a town of 200 people. That's why we sing today, 2,000 years later, "O little town of Bethlehem." Some of you are going to have Christmas gatherings of 200 people, right? Like it was so tiny, and so it was such a big deal. Pretty much everybody in the town of Bethlehem was probably related. And so when Naomi comes back after years of being in Moab, after such great loss, it is a big deal, and people start coming out to greet her. Naomi's back, but this time she's not back with her family. This time she's back with a Moabite woman. She's lost her husband. She's lost her home. She's lost her family. She's lost her sons. And remember, she had the name that meant sweet and pleasant, but she doesn't want to be known by that anymore. As people come out and greet her, they say, "Naomi, we're so glad to see you." She said, No. That's not how this is rolling. Don't call me Naomi. Look at verse 20. She says, "Don't call me Naomi. Instead, call me Mara," which the word Mara means bitter. It means very bitter, like you can't even taste. It's so bitter. "For the Almighty has made my life very bitter for me. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me home empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has caused me to suffer and the Almighty has sent such tragedy upon me?" She is so mad at God. He deserted her. He did this to her. He sent this tragedy into her life. He hasn't come through. He didn't show up. She's lost her son. She's lost her home. She's lost her land. She's lost her husband. And she is so disappointed. All she wanted was a toy. And all she has unwrapped is grief and heartache. And she doesn't want to be called sweet anymore. Don't even bring that junk to me. Call me Mara. Call me bitter. And here's what happens. When you and I live with unfulfilled hopes and unfulfilled dreams, and we live with bitterness, and we live with anger toward God, what eventually happens is that becomes our identity. And she says, "Hey, I don't even want to be known as sweet and pleasant anymore. All I want to be known as is bitter." And some of you are like, how is this hopeful? Merry Christmas. Like, what is going on here? Is this story and is Christmas really all about loss and grief? What if Naomi and Ruth's story is about something different? What if it's not about loss? What if it's not about grief? Is the story of your life, the entire story of your life, really about the circumstances that you're going through right now? Is the all-encompassing story of your life really all about your divorce right now? Is the all-encompassing story of your life really all about your infertility right now? Is the all-encompassing story of your life really about your job loss or your miscarriage, or the death of a dream, or the death of a loved one? Or could it be about something else? We tend to get focused on what is right in front of us. And Naomi and Ruth, they had hopes. They had dreams. They wanted a toy. And what they unwrapped was not what they signed up for. They were unwrapped disappointment and hurt. They unwrapped a sweater. But if there's one word that describes Ruth's life and Naomi's life, it's not loss. It's hope. It's hope. So they get back to Bethlehem and they get settled, and then Ruth goes to work, which is very uncharacteristic for women in that culture. Why did she go to work? Well, there's no person to take care of her and Naomi, and so Ruth took ownership of her responsibility of caring for this widow. And she goes and works in a field. And she starts following farmers in this field and collecting the leftover grain that they failed to pick up when they were harvesting their crops. Now, this seems like an odd thing, but this was part of the welfare system of the Jewish community. There was actually a law that required farmers to leave the leftovers. Whatever they couldn't get in the first swipe of the harvest was required to be left to take care of the poor in that community. This would be the equivalent of someone going out and collecting cans on Keystone Avenue and taking the money into Kroger and receiving the money from the recycling. Right? That's what Ruth is doing to take care of Naomi. She had to work. But as Ruth is working in this field, something amazing happens. Something very significant in her life and eventually in the life of Naomi happens. The owner of the field, this guy named Boaz, notices her. Look at Ruth chapter 2, verse 3. So Ruth went out to gather grain behind the harvesters, and as it happened, she found herself working in a field that belonged to Boaz, the relative of her father-in-law, Elimelech. I love how it says, and as it happened, just by chance, coincidentally, it just so happened that Boaz owns this property. This guy who's a godly man, he's never been married, he's good looking, he's wealthy. You know, he's the type of person that your mom wished she had set you up with rather than your husband, right? Like he has everything, right? Like, will you accept this rose? Like that's him, right? And Ruth is working in his field, and she has no idea. And you know what happens? Boaz notices her, and he befriends her, and he starts liking her. Well, when Naomi finds out about this, she's like, we got to capitalize on this moment. So she signs them both up for Match.com. And they get an account. Well, for our purposes, it'd be more like Christian Mingle, all right? So they get a Christian Mingle account, and they're going to wink at each other. And she says to Ruth, hey, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go home. I want you to take a shower, because you've been working in the field. Let's just be honest, okay? Take a shower, put on your best perfume, put on your best clothes. Then, Boaz is going to be working in the barn tonight. I want you to go to the barn in the evening once it's dark. He's going to lay down. He's going to go to sleep after the sun goes down. When he does that, I want you to get in bed with him and lay at his feet, and he will tell you what to do from there. Some of you are like, what? That's in the Bible? That's not Christian Mingle. That's Tinder, right? Like that's a hookup, right? Like, what is going on? Well, get your mind out of the gutter. It's not a hookup, all right? What is Naomi saying? Naomi is giving Ruth kind of the customary way of indicating to a man that she's interested. By sleeping at his feet, it's this act of submission. And he has to decide if he is going to reciprocate her feelings. And so this isn't about a hookup, this is about a proposal. She is actually offering a proposal to Boaz, like, I'm available, willing to relocate, take a look at me. So this is what happens in verse 8 of chapter 3. Around midnight, Boaz suddenly woke up and turned over. He was surprised to find a woman lying at his feet. I think I get shook when my dog lays down in my bed, all right? And so he says, whoa, who are you, he asked. I am your servant Ruth, she replied. Make me your wife according to God's law, and you are a close relative. I love Boaz's response. Thank God for a girl like you, all right? Now, don't worry about a thing, my daughter. I will do what is necessary, for everyone in town knows that you're a virtuous woman. This is incredible. She is a Moabite woman. She is a foreigner. She is a widow. Not only did women in that culture not have any standing in communities, widows were looked down upon because they didn't have a man to define them, to give them value. Not only is she a woman, not only is she a widow, she is a foreign woman, and everybody in town, everybody in Bethlehem knows what a virtuous, what an upstanding, what a righteous and loyal woman Ruth is. Her reputation precedes her. This story has so many implications for the Christmas season because Boaz is known what is called throughout the book of Ruth as a guardian redeemer. Now, let me explain this concept of guardian redeemer to you. This was a law in the Jewish culture that said when a man fell in hard times and wasn't able to pay for the land that he owned, or if the man of the house passed away, before that land was sold to another family or another person, there could be what was called a guardian redeemer that could step in, take responsibility for the land and the family, and purchase that land before it goes to another tribe or another family. This was super important because tribes were very, very important, and they wanted to keep the land within the tribe. And so Boaz comes in and he says, hey, I will take responsibility for Elimelech's property, and I'll take responsibility for Ruth. Ruth, who's a Moabite. Ruth, who's a pagan woman from a pagan culture in a foreign land. She is someone that no one in that culture outside of that family would ever take care of. She is someone that would be discarded and overlooked and pushed to the side. She's someone that no one would ever want. And Boaz says, hey, I'll love who no one else will love. And I'll care for who no one else will care for. And I'll redeem who nobody else will redeem. And so Boaz falls for Ruth, and it's this awesome love story. But there's a problem, as there always is. They realize that Boaz is related to Naomi, but he's not next in line. He's not the closest guardian redeemer. And so he kind of strategizes like, okay, how can I go to the rightful guardian redeemer and convince him to give me this land so I can be with Ruth, so she doesn't become the wife of another person. And so he goes to him and he says, hey, you have every right to Elimelech's property, and you can have it, but just so you know, the minute that you take possession of that property, you also get a Moabite woman, and you get a mother-in-law that's living in the upstairs bedroom who only wants to be known by bitter. So good luck with that, all right? And you know what the guy says? Go in peace, my man. All right? He's like, I'm good. And so Boaz falls for Ruth, and they build a relationship. In Ruth chapter 4, verse 13, it says this, so Boaz took Ruth into his home, and she became his wife. When he slept with her, the Lord enabled her to become pregnant, and she gave birth to a son. This is an amazing story. Boaz says, I will buy this property, and I will redeem this woman, and I will care for this foreigner. I will care for this Moabite woman. Why? What did Boaz have to gain? Why would Boaz, with very little history, who has kept himself single his entire life, and there was probably so many opportunities for an arranged marriage with an actual good Israelite woman, and here he chooses to fall in love with a Moabite woman and to redeem her and to redeem her family. Why would he do that? Well, for some of you, you're going to recognize the name of Boaz's mom. Do you remember when the Israelites were getting ready to enter the Promised Land, and this is before they marched around Jericho and the walls came down and they conquered the city? They wanted to find out who actually lived in the Promised Land, and so they sent 12 spies into the Promised Land. And it was like this reconnaissance mission, right? They're going to go and give a report back. Well, they needed safe harbor, and they needed to be hidden, and they needed safety. And you know who chose to risk their life and hide the 12 spies of Israel in Jericho? It was a prostitute named Rahab. And this prostitute named Rahab just so happened to have a son. And this streetwalker just happened to name her son Boaz. And so maybe Boaz grew up with a mom he saw be discarded and be used, be trampled on by other men. And he said, I'm not going to allow that to happen to Ruth. I'm going to be her redeemer. Maybe Boaz has such compassion for Ruth because his mom was so far from perfect, but yet she loved him so much. It's like Ruth and Naomi had this Christmas present. And on the outside, it looked really good. It was the life that they wanted, right? They were living their life in Moab. And then things just kind of went south, and they opened it up, and it wasn't anything that they could have imagined. It was filled with bitterness, hurt, and pain. But as they began to see not just what was on the outside, but what was on the inside of this gift, they found hope. And some of you have been given a gift that on the outside, it looks good, right? And you have all this hope and all this anticipation of what this could be and what your life could be and all that God might have for you. And as you open up this gift, you realize that, man, this is not what I signed up for. This is not what I had in mind. I didn't sign up for divorce. I didn't sign up for cancer. I didn't sign up for death. I didn't sign up for debt. I didn't sign up for addiction. I didn't sign up for unemployment. I didn't sign up to lose my job. Why is God bringing me all kinds of loneliness and loss and abuse? What did I do to him? How could I experience adultery or pain or infertility? Right? And you had all of this hope when the present was wrapped up. But you had all of this hope when you were younger. You had all this hope when you first got married. You had all this hope when you first got your job. You had all of this hope when you first started dating this person. And now all you can see is pain. And you're not just losing hope. You're losing yourself. But before Ruth and Naomi lost hope, you know what they had to do? They had to look inside the box. And inside the box was this son. Boaz made Ruth his wife, and together they had a son. And you know what that son brought? That son. It's in here somewhere. He brought hope, right? And he brought a future. Sometimes you got to look for it, all right? And because he brought hope and a future, he brought a blessing back to Naomi's life. And eventually he brought salvation to this family. That's what he brought. The last picture that we have of Naomi in the book of Ruth is in Ruth chapter 4, verse 17. You know what she's doing? She is holding her grandson. And it says this, "Now at last, Naomi has a son again." Now check this out. "And they named him Obed, and he became the father of Jesse, the grandfather of David." What? Boaz and Ruth have a son, and Naomi's great-great-grandson is King David? The greatest king in the Old Testament, the predecessor to the person of Jesus? When you get to the New Testament, you get to Matthew chapter 1. Matthew chapter 1 is literally all just a genealogy. Before Ancestry.com, Matthew just lays it all out there. He goes all the way back, and you want to know who's there? In that genealogy, Rahab the prostitute is there. And Boaz, the guardian redeemer, is there. And Ruth, the Moabite woman, is there. And Obed, their son, is there. And Jesse is there. And David is there. And eventually, you know who comes out if you go deep into the box, deeper than Naomi and Ruth could have ever seen when they were experiencing loss and pain and hurt and disappointment. Jesus is there. And they were responsible because they held on to hope. They helped usher in what we sit here to celebrate today, the wonder of Christmas. And it wasn't found through streamers, and it wasn't found just through easy times, and it wasn't found just through celebration. It was found through hard times. And years later in the town of Bethlehem, why did Mary and Joseph have to go back to Bethlehem? They had to go back because that's where they were from. They're required by law to go back to where their ancestors were from, so they had to sign up for this census. And they get back there, and the birthplace of hope takes place. The ultimate Redeemer is born. The reason for our hope today was in a town of 200 people that no one had ever heard of. And he is your guardian redeemer. When you feel at your worst, when you feel like you're hopeless, when you feel like you have nothing left to give, Jesus comes in and he says, I'll love you if you don't feel lovable. I'll choose you if you don't feel worthy. I'll live with you if nobody else will. You think that your life doesn't have meaning because you're single? I'm with you. I choose you. I love you. You feel hopeless? Hope is found in our response to disappointment. I don't know that you can have hope without experiencing loss. I don't know that you can have hope without experiencing hurt. I don't know that you can have authentic, God-given hope without experiencing disappointment. You know why? Because hope is like this picture of a future that should and could be. That's what hope is. And it means that you're living in a reality that shouldn't be right now, but you have hope for something different. And so as we start this Christmas season together, would you rediscover the wonder of hope, no matter your circumstances, because your circumstances don't define you. And you may be a part of a bigger story right now that you have no idea what hangs in the balance when you choose to be faithful, when you choose to say yes to God, even when it doesn't make sense, when you choose to trust God, even when you've lost all hope. Bring all of this to Jesus. He's the King that can bring you hope. Let's pray together. God, we come to you today and we thank you for being our Redeemer, for choosing us when we were unworthy, for loving us when we were unlovable, for wanting to be in a relationship with us when we turned our back on you. For those of us that aren't experiencing the life that we thought we would right now, would you remind us that there is hope, that there is a future, that you don't want the best version of us, you want the most authentic version of us. So give us the courage to bring all of us to you so that we can rediscover the wonder of hope. In Jesus' name, amen.